Hi, my name is Jessica Hilt. This is a story about my secret family recipe for Cuban black beans and rice. I like to say a white woman taught me how to cook it. She was my mother. Her maiden name was White. I think this is important because if you ask my mother the roots of her ancestry, she'll tell you with a dismissive wave that it's some German. My father's mother died when he was very young, and his family moved to the Midwest. He didn't like to tell people that his family was from Cuba. He rarely elaborated on the subject. But my mother, she liked to sneak us cultural information, and she made her first attempt at Cuban cooking. My mother's secret family recipe for Cuban black beans and rice. 1 can of condensed Campbell's black bean soup. 3 cups cooked rice. The puree of black sludge that moved along the cast iron pan set my sister and I squealing. "What else goes in it?" I asked. My mother told us that beans and rice provide the perfect complementary protein profile and that nutritionally we needed nothing more. We pushed around the tar on our plates, watching as the rice stuck to it. I closed my eyes and stuck the fork in my mouth. My younger sister watched expectantly, and I nodded. It wasn't as bad as it sounded. One of the bazillion fights that I had with my father was over which to take in middle school, French or Spanish. I wanted to take French like the rest of my friends, but he insisted on Spanish. He spoke no Spanish, so why should I? Because I said so. I pouted and cried. Eventually, I took Spanish. On long car trips, my mother would ask me to teach her some Spanish. Tell me the words for I love you. Te quiero. Te quiero. She pronounced over and over again the wrong way. No, mom, quiero. And she kept with the quiero. Quiero. She didn't hear the difference. My father taught us the only phrase he knew in Spanish. Dos cervezas, por favor. You have to order 2 in Mexico, he told us. We would have contest, the roll of the double R. My sister was best at it. She could roll her tongue high and rapid like a squeaky fan. My mother couldn't roll her R's at all. She sounded like a nearly dead cat. We coached and she tried, but it never happened. Girls, it's lost on me. It's your Cuban genes. My mother became obsessed with finding the perfect version of black beans and rice to pass along to her children. Her secret family recipe for Cuban black beans and rice. Saute 1 chopped onion, 2 chopped bell peppers, and 1 clove garlic in 1 tablespoon of vegetable oil. When onions are translucent, add 1 can of chopped tomatoes, 2 cans of black beans drained. Reduce heat to low and simmer for half an hour. Serve over white rice. I was hungry for Cuba. Anything with Spanish on the label or remotely Latino, but there was little in Ohio. I don't know what drove me to my obsession. My mother's influence, the idea of being different in Middle America, or just that this was part of me, and I wanted to keep it. When I moved to California, I finally practiced my Spanish, and I learned my accent was as bad as my mother's. I found food stalls in Barrio Logan, roach coaches that turned me on to tacos del cabeza and Oaxacan cheese. There were whole supermarkets that had food I couldn't find in the Midwest. At the university, I studied literature and took classes in Spanish, meeting other Cuban American students for the first time. They grew up speaking Spanish. They would look at me when I said my family was from Cuba, up and down. I stopped telling people my ancestry. I decided I had no right to my Cuban heritage, but I still cooked Cuban. I learned how to make plantains and croquetas, ropa vieja that produced the tenderest beef. I read articles on the slow food movement in Cuba and how the lack of food produced large community gardens. So I started a garden of my own. But I was still eluded by the perfect black beans and rice. I would dream about wells of black beans simmering in the ground. They looked like shallow puddles with bubbles of black liquid on the surface, but they were deep, and I was afraid to go near the edge because I could tumble in. In my dreams, I never knew how much of the ingredients to add and worried that there was nothing authentic about my black beans, and this would wake me up. Eventually, I stopped trying to cook them. When I went to visit my friend in El Salvador in the Peace Corps, she nicknamed me Profunda Piscina, deep pool. She gave it to me because of the gallons of potable water that I drank, but I liked the name. It reminded me of my black beans in my dreams and how my heritage may look shallow on the surface, like a puddle, but it ran deep in me because of my mother and the worry that her daughters would forget their roots. So it's true. I stopped trying to find the secret family recipe for Cuban black beans and rice, some perfect recipe that doesn't exist in my family because we've changed, we've adapted. We're a fusion family. I stopped worrying about perfection and authenticity. I use peppers from my garden and bacon from my farmer's market, oil from the mercado on the corner, and Mexican crema. I rarely serve it on rice. Profunda piscina frijoles negro, and it is truly my secret family recipe.